Okay, so this is going to be a video on Kant, even though we read him a couple weeks ago, and a video that prepares you for the upcoming paper, since the upcoming paper sort of casts Kant against the latter three authors, Foucault, Adorno, and Horkheimer, and Marcuse. So, as you recall in his short essay, What is Enlightenment?, Kant answers that question by saying that enlightenment is essentially autonomy. And autonomy means thinking for yourself. So, you are enlightened when you can think for yourself, when you generate your own reasons to back up the things that you think, your beliefs, your opinions, political, philosophical, social, and otherwise. So it's not a requirement that you have to necessarily have the right answer to be enlightened, but your answers have to be truly your own. They have to, come from you. They have to be a product of your own thinking. They can't just be something that you regurgitate from, let's say your parents or your teachers or anyone else that might be in some kind of position of epistemic authority over you, someone that would be said to have more knowledge of you. We do have those people in our lives and we can get certain knowledge from them, but we don't just want to cede our capacities to think for ourselves to them. Rousseau might phrase it, we don't want to alienate our autonomy. Instead, we want to ensure that the ideas that we have, the positions that we hold, are actually our own, and that is what enlightenment is. And Kant says that people are not enlightened for two central reasons. They're either lazy, they're intellectually lazy, or they are intellectually sort of cowards. So it's cowardice and laziness that impedes individuals from thinking for themselves. So the first one, individuals are afraid to think for themselves. This could be for a number of reasons. Sometimes if everybody around you thinks a certain way, there's a certain social pressure to think along with them. That could be your group of friends in your social circle, or it could be, let's say, the majority of your classmates. You're talking about something in class and clearly you see that there's a majority opinion, and that puts a little social pressure on you to conform to that opinion. And social pressure is a real thing. We don't want to discount it, but people have to have the courage to think for themselves, even against adversity or against odds. So some people lack this courage, although they may want to think for themselves, and that's an impediment. The other impediment is laziness. I mean, sometimes to think for yourself, if you want to have an opinion on some political issue, some social issue, something like, free trade or euthanasia, you're going to have to do some, research. You're going to have to read. You're going to have to read about these issues. You're going to have to see what people say, see what the experts say, get a lay of the land of the sort of intellectual atmosphere in order to form your own opinions. When we talked about the prospects of having a direct democracy where everybody votes on every law, I highlighted that some people don't really want to do that because that would require the intellectual labor necessary to, dig up that background information so that you can make an informed decision. So laziness and cowardice are the two central reasons Kant highlights as the reasons why people don't think for themselves. Now, Kant also has a term for people. The term is the guardians, and the guardians are people who are either too lazy or too cowardice to think for themselves. They rely on guardians. These are people that individuals cede their autonomy to. Now that could, like I said, be your social circle, it could be your teacher, it could be your parents, and they're called guardians not because they protect you, but because in some ways they keep you from thinking for yourself, or rather you allow yourself to be kept from thinking for yourself by them. And so Kant has that quote in What is Enlightenment that goes something like, if I have a physician who prescribes my diet, someone who we'd call like a dietitian, then I have no need to exert my will. In other words, if I had someone to make all the decisions for me about the food I eat, I wouldn't have to do any work, but then the food I eat, you know, wouldn't truly be of my own making. And just as a little aside, there's that phrase, you are what you eat, and if you don't even make your own autonomous decisions about what you eat and why, then maybe the you that you become isn't really even you, because you didn't do the work necessary to make your own decisions regarding the food that you eat. But what I want to highlight about what Kant is saying is that he thinks, aside from the guardians, who he would say, you know, if you let the guardians think for you, that's basically your fault, not necessarily theirs. So for Kant, what I want to highlight and what's relevant to the paper is that he thinks that autonomy or enlightenment is really an internal matter, something that happens inside your head where you think for yourself. And you're either too lazy or too cowardice if you can't do that. So this idea of Kant highlighting the internal process of thinking for oneself as how he frames enlightenment, that's going to be important, because I want you to consider that against the things that Foucault, Adorno, and Horkheimer, and Marcuse highlight. Because what they're going to be doing, what their project is as postmodern French, German, what we call continental philosophers, their job, or what their historical importance was to critique these Enlightenment philosophers, Rousseau, but particularly Kant, because Kant was the most influential across so many different fields of philosophy. Rousseau's mainly a political philosopher. So what they're going to highlight, what they're going to say is, well, internal thinking is all well and good, and certainly people can do that. But if Kant thinks that that's the only condition one needs to go through, or the only dimension one needs to go through in order to be enlightened, and to maintain your autonomy, Kant might be mistaken. What they're going to highlight are things that come up in the external dimension. So if the internal dimension is thinking for yourself inside your head, right, that's what's internal, then what's external is what is outside of you, what is around you. And really what these guys are going to be talking about is not so much the natural world around you, but the social, political world around you. So what's going on in that external dimension, the society that you live in, and the things that characterize that society, let's say like surveillance, wealth inequality, capitalism, an imperative to consume products, movies and TV, the intellectual atmosphere, the media. How do these things that are outside of us affect, let's say, our thinking, which is inside of us? And if Kant is only highlighting what's going on inside your head as the condition for autonomy, because remember, he said the two main impediments are you. Either you're too lazy or you're too much of a coward to think for yourself. And he wasn't really highlighting what goes on in the social environment as a major impediment to autonomy. So what the paper is going to be about is how you guys think about, let's say, these two dimensions, the internal dimension and the external dimension, and how we would put these two sets of philosophers. Kant is a set by himself, and then Foucault, Adorno, Horkheimer, two guys but they wrote together, and Marcuse as the next set. So now I'm going to make the video on Foucault, and then we'll get to the other two people. So the key takeaways from this video are how Kant defines autonomy, what he thinks the major impediments are, what he sort of highlights by implication, the internal dimension, and what he omits by implication, the external dimension, that is to say, the social political world.